On October 3, 2023, Manitoba held provincial elections. The NDP was the winning party, and its leader, Wab Kinew, became the new premier. For the first time in Canadian history, a First Nations member became leader of a provincial government. Recently B'nai Brith's director in Manitoba, Dr. Ruth Ashrafi, had the privilege of sitting down with Premier Kinew and discussing the significance of being Canada's First Nations premier, as well as the current rise in anti-Semitism and best practices in combating this ancient hatred.
Good day, Premier Kinew, and thank you for joining us. For our viewers, I am Dr. Ruth Ashrafi, representing Brith Canada, oldest human rights organization. Our mission is to eradicate racism, anti-Semitism, and all forms of hatred while championing the rights of the marginalized. Next year, we'll be celebrating our 150th year anniversary, and I urge everyone to follow our website for information of events that we are planning to hold in Manitoba and across Canada. Premier, it's an honor to have you here. Your victory in the provincial elections on October the 3rd marked a historic milestone as you became Canada's first First Nations Premier. Congratulations on that remarkable achievement. Last September, I had the privilege of attending a gala honoring Chief Wallace McKay. There were many chiefs, and they presented him with a headdress and traditional blankets. That was quite a powerful moment. And a few weeks later, at your swearing-in ceremony, I saw you, Manitoba's premier, wearing a headdress, and it was equally impactful. What were your thoughts and feelings during that ceremony?
Well, I think first and foremost, I felt very humble because of the awe-inspiring responsibility that the people of Manitoba invested our team with. And I don't know how else you can respond with being tapped on the shoulder to lead a government other than with saying, I'm going to take this very seriously, I'm going to be very humble, and I'm going to work my hardest each and every day to do a good job. And I really appreciate your recollections of seeing Mr. McKay. And for me, as with everyone, I think it's important to bring a piece of who we are forward. Part of that is to honor where we come from as individuals and as people from our respective cultural backgrounds. And part of it is to share with other Manitobans so that Manitobans can understand the nature of our province as being a rich mosaic and as being a province that is made up of people from many different walks of life who live here together in a good way. And so to be on the stage, to be asked to swear an oath to the people was a high honor. And I was really happy. Former Justice Murray Sinclair was there as well to administer the oaths for us. And he's certainly a well-recognized Canadian. And he had some very good words for us, which were about putting the people first and serving their best interests. Even if it's not always the easy thing to do, you should do the right thing.
Wonderful. And in your swearing-in ceremony, you referred to it already, it beautifully integrated elements from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous cultures. So you spoke already about it a little bit. What was the message that you were hoping to convey with this diverse celebration?
Well, I wanted to send a message to Manitobans about who we are as a province and also about our history. And one of the interesting things about Manitoba is that we're the province that was brought into Confederation by an Indigenous nation, the Métis people of the Red River. And so having an Indigenous cultural component is an important way to pay respect not only to Indigenous nations, but also to our history over the last 154 years in Manitoba since we've joined Confederation. And then, of course, there's the ceremony and the protocol that comes with governing in Manitoba. So the idea of the Great Seal and having somebody to administer the oaths and to, pledge allegiance to the King and to do things like that is tradition within our democracy that ties us to the other democratically elected governments over the history. And so with our swearing in, we wanted to show a nod to the people of the province, a nod to our democracy, and also to nod to our shared history, and really to just try and show, by acknowledging each of those things that are important to so many people in the province, to send a message of unity as well, that even if we come from different walks of life, we're all engaged in our shared democratic project and in this province that we all love so much.
That leads perfectly into the next question. The recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they highlight several issues, such as residential schools in the 60s scoop, and many First Nations individuals still face significant challenges, including discrimination and disproportionate representation in various systems. Addressing all these issues can seem overwhelming. Where does one begin to make meaningful changes? And what roles do the government, communities, and individuals play?
Well, I think this is a very important question, and it's one that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, led by Murray Sinclair, gives us a roadmap to. And having the role that I do as a First Minister within a government, I think about healthcare a lot, and I think about education a lot. And in particular, when we talk about education, I think about it as an economic input and an economic good. It's helping the next generation of people who are going to drive the economy. But I also know that there's a social component. Some part of education is also about building citizens, and it's about, having the society that we want for the future together. And so when I think about reconciliation and improving the lives of Indigenous people in Manitoba, I think there's a way for us to do that, to improve the standard of living for Indigenous people while ensuring everyone else in the society maintains their standard of living or gets better off. And I think about healthcare first and foremost. So how do we improve the life expectancy and the health outcomes for Indigenous peoples? Part of that is investing in healthcare and training. We're very lucky in this province. We have many Indigenous physicians and Indigenous people working in the healthcare system. So that's a big asset for us. But at the same time, education is also a social determinant of health. So if we can make sure that that average child, whether they're in the inner city, on a reserve, in rural Manitoba, in the suburbs, if they have a good chance at schooling, if they have a pathway to post-secondary, they're going to be healthier over the course of their lives than they might otherwise be. They're going to be more productive in our broader economy. They're going to help contribute to the rest of our society in a way that perhaps previous generations haven't been able to contribute to the same extent. And so for me, again, there's many paths to this goal that we all share of improving the standard of well-being for everybody. And my approach generally is to start by thinking through health and education and economic windows towards seeing that future goal.
That's a powerful vision. Unfortunately, today's society is tackling racism that is targeting many marginalized communities, including the Jewish community. On November the 2nd in 2022, the Manitoba legislature adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IHRA for short, crafted this definition and it has gained global acceptance. What motivated you, as the then leader of the opposition, to support the adoption of this definition in Manitoba?
Well, I think first and foremost, I want to be a good ally to the Jewish community here in Manitoba. And this was a priority that was brought forward to us as meaning something important to Jewish people in Manitoba. And so I think that was the starting point. And as I began to read the definition and the explanatory examples, and also to dive into some of the discourse around the IHRA definition, I also reflected on the rise in anti-Semitism that unfortunately we've been seeing. And I know your organization has done a superb job in documenting this unfortunate rise in hatred. And so I've definitely been reviewing those materials over the past number of years as well. And I guess what I concluded is not only is this an important tool in terms of being able to call out anti-Semitism and to be able to take steps towards ending that form of hatred in our society, but I also think that the IHRA definition is a tool that we can use towards education. And we can perhaps point to some of the explanatory examples and use them as a jumping off point for dialogue and say, for example, can you see how generalizing about a Jewish person based on this criteria that is set out in the explanatory example, how that's harmful and how that's racist and how that's discriminatory? And then maybe we can use that as a bridge towards understanding and towards in the first instance, of course, combating anti-Semitism, but maybe also having a conversation about, so what does that mean about other forms of discrimination that we hope to stamp out in our society? And so we engaged in a lot of conversation and a lot of dialogue and a lot of research in the work that we did to support the IHRA definition. And I continue to believe that it's a good tool for us to use as a society for both the work of combating racism and anti-Semitism, but also because I do think there's an education that can go along with talking about those examples and the history, and of course, just ensuring that that's all done within a context of supporting human rights and ensuring that the Jewish community here in Manitoba is respected and feels safe.
Thank you. And this also segues into my next question. Since the Hamas attack on Israel on October the 7th, we've observed a troubling spike in anti-Semitic incidents, with B'nai B'rith's annual audit, to which you referred, reporting a 109% increase nationally in 2023. Many visibly Jewish individuals in Manitoba and across Canada have been targeted and harassed. How do you see the IHRA definition helping governments and agencies to identify and combat anti-Semitism effectively other than education, to which you already spoke about?
Yes. So I reviewed the report that came out this year. And what I think was significant about it is that it cataloged and it quantified what we've already been hearing from many Jewish people in Manitoba, which is that many people have felt an additional intensity in anti-Semitic commentary and behavior that they're experiencing in the public sphere, on campuses, and unfortunately, even in some folks' own homes. We've heard many examples here in Winnipeg, as an example of families who thought twice about, whether it was a flag or a menorah or some other visible symbol of their Jewish identity being put on display. People were thinking twice about it. Some people removed those for concerns about safety, and that's just not right. So I think the IHRA definition, along with the ongoing work of your organization, and of course with the support of relevant agencies, whether it's government, law enforcement, civil society, I think the IHRA definition helps us to be able to clearly identify, diagnose, and therefore take action towards our shared interest, which is to combat anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred in our society. But again, since October 7th, I think we've all been forced to confront a very concerning rise in anti-Semitic behavior in our province and in other parts of Canada. And so the IHRA definition, I think, is something that we need to use in this current context, because it does offer us a path forward to have an agreed upon set of facts and an agreed upon criteria to lead those responses. And the responses themselves, I think, would vary on the setting. In some cases, it's law enforcement needs to lead the response. In other cases, it's civil society needs to lead the response. In other cases, it's government that needs to lead the response. And so there's a whole set of policy options that can be brought to bear. And I really do think it is going to take all of us working together to stamp out hatred.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Another question. At many pro-Palestinian rallies, one hears the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And this is widely interpreted as a call for the dismantling of Israel and the eradication of the Jewish people. How can your government address such expressions? And do you consider them as hate speech?
Well, I think that it's important for me, first of all, to say that what happened on October 7th was a tragedy, was completely senseless, and that the murder of civilians, the use of sexual violence, so many of the terrible things that we saw on October 7th can never be justified. And what I've called for is the dismantling of Hamas. And specifically that given the fact we see that their founding ideology is based on one of hatred and anti-Semitism, that the Western world, that free-thinking people all over the place should always be calling for Hamas to be eliminated. I also think that it's important for our government to set the groundwork for all Manitobans to be able to live together in a good way. And I think one of the things, in addition to the horror of October 7th and all of the difficult times that we've experienced since, one of the challenges that that's presented us with here in Manitoba is that it's made more difficult for some neighbors in Manitoba to be able to carry on just having a positive relationship here in this place that we call home. And that could be because people are confronted with incidents of anti-Semitism. That could be because people are feeling unsafe. It could be because of the mental health impacts of all of the above, if you will. And so I think our government has an important role to play. And so we have been certainly trying to be a visible and present ally to the Jewish community in Manitoba. We recently marked Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, of course. And so as a person in a position of leadership, it was important for me to attend the reading of the Holocaust scroll at Temple Shalom. It was important for members of our team, including myself, to participate in B'nai Brith's reading of the names of victims of the Holocaust. It was important for us to host an event here at the legislature. And one of the things that we did to mark that occasion is to reiterate our commitment to make sure that a Holocaust education is mandatory in our K-12 system. And so for that throne speech commitment to be given life, we've also invested in dedicated staff and a specific $150,000 allocation towards being able to build up that curriculum within our provincial school system. And when it gets to the specifics of your question, yes, I do believe that calling for the elimination of the Jewish people, that is hate speech, and that is not acceptable. And so we need to continue to ensure that we're working with community to show supports, and we also need to speak out when we see hatred enter the public sphere. I do think that we need to also, as I was just saying about the Manitoba context, need to try and create an environment where one Manitoban can live in peace alongside another Manitoban, and that will always be our focus.
And this particular expression, the from the river to the sea, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's being uttered in a specific context, and I think that there has to be a recognition of what that means within this current context post-October 7th. And so for our government, we're always going to continue to be there to try and ensure that we're supporting the Jewish community, that we're supporting the Muslim community here in Manitoba with a focus on living together and being safe.
Thank you. In light of increasing polarization and divisive rhetoric, how can we foster a culture of dialogue and understanding among the different communities here in Manitoba?
Yeah, and this is kind of the next step, I guess, of the questions that you're posing is, given the current context, given the fraught environment, given the concerns around safety. And if we speak of anti-Semitism, I think we also acknowledge that Islamophobia exists in our society, and we've seen incidents of that. And I think the role that we want to take as Manitobans, as free-thinking people in a democracy, is we want to work together to ensure that we can live together in safety, that we can combat hatred, that we can call out anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic behavior. And so for me, I think that it's always important for me to start with the safety as a fundamental piece. Mm-hmm. And then once we ensure that folks are safe in the physical sense, but also in terms of safe to express who you are. I started this conversation by saying, I think it's important for me to be able to wear a war bonnet, a headdress, to be able to show my Indigenous identity. I think a Jewish person should be free and feel safe to display aspects of their identity in public as well. And it makes me sad to hear that students, members of the community don't feel safe, whether it's to wear the kippah or whether it's to show a Star of David or to participate in gatherings. To me, that is a sign that we have work to do around safety. And then my hope is, I think one of the things Manitoba has that's really great is we have a lot of interfaith dialogue. We have a multi-faith council. We have folks from civil society, some of whom are not even tied to religious or spiritual organizations. They're just folks who like to engage in a dialogue around a free and open society. And I think that those allies who come from different walks of life are good places for us to start, and just making sure that the ongoing conversation of saying, we have an agreed upon set of facts. And by the way, this agreed upon set of facts has to include the Holocaust and a shared understanding of what a terrible abomination the Holocaust was, and how that has been such a huge determinant in global history in the years since. And then we take it from there. And I think we talk through these issues. There's myriad issues that have emerged over the past few months. I'm sure they will continue to evolve over the course of not just this conflict, but also going forward into the future. And I think the only way that we can sort through those complexities and those challenges is, again, making sure that people are safe, and that we keep coming back to the table to engage with one another, and that we have an agreed upon shared set of facts, and that we agree that we're going to use those facts to put our minds together and put our hearts together and construct a future that's beneficial for all of us.
That is a beautiful segue into my last question. Is there a message, well, there have been many messages, that you would like especially to send to the Jewish community and other minority communities in Manitoba about your commitment to human rights and equality?
Well, I'm a true believer when it comes to human rights and to civil liberties. And I believe that the human rights framework that we have, which I would also add the acceptance of the human rights framework in our democracies, cannot be divorced from the aftermath of the Holocaust. I think that's something that I would like people to understand as well, that this human rights framework that we have in Canada and in other democracies is one of the most powerful tools that we have to ensure the well-being and the liberty and the freedom and just, the possibility of a good life for the most amount of people. And part of what I believe, or my role in, a leadership position, is for groups such as the Jewish community who feel their human rights are being infringed upon, that it's important to be a good ally. And so just as I would want somebody to be a good ally to an Indigenous person in our time of need, I think it's important for me to be a good ally to the LGBT individual who feels discriminated against, to be a good ally to the newcomer who feels that they're not being seen, and in this current context, to be a good ally to the Jewish community, given the tense and fraught nature of this current moment. And given the outsized importance of the Holocaust in the global history of the past 100 years, I do think that it's important for us to continue doing the work of keeping the living memory of that terrible human genocide alive within this generation. And so not only is our government committed to incorporating that in education, I think in closing, I would just want to share that at a recent trade delegation that we took to Washington, D.C., which was, business leaders, labor, community leaders, different sectors represented. We visited the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And I'm grateful to Gustavo Zentner for arranging our visit and to be hosted by a former ambassador for the U.S. and that every delegate from our trade delegation participated in this. And at the end, we had a moment of reflection in which I was invited to share a few words. And I said that it's very important for us to keep the living memory of this alive so that we can live up to those important words of never again. And so there are sometimes a need for guiding lights to our moral compass in this world. And I think that those two words, specifically defined as they are by Jewish people in Manitoba and around the world, are important considerations for us to keep close to our hearts and minds at all times. And so my words would be words of wanting to be a good ally and to show support, and also to renew my commitment to human rights and having a pluralistic, multicultural society where we can all do well.
Thank you so much, Premier, once again, for discussing these critical issues with us. And B'nai Brith, we look forward to collaborating with your government to fight anti-Semitism and racism, and to make sure that Manitoba is an inclusive society for everyone. Thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for the time, Ruth, and thank you also to all your viewers.
Thank you. Thank you.
This brings our program to a close. We thank Premier Wab Kinew. If you would like to follow B'nai Brith's activities, please subscribe to our newsletter and check us out on social media. Thank you for joining us, and a very good evening.